So I'm not going to go over all the details of the shooting in New Zealand. I'm just going to cover a few points. Yes, it is an atrocity. It is a violent act. But what we're getting though is a kind of a double standard kind of media play that always kind of follows these things. Now, this is one news article, and what I want to point out that it's recanting all the horrors that have happened to the Muslims, and going even into the United States and calling hate crimes against Muslims, which is kind of funny because this is in New Zealand, but we're obviously have to bring it home to the States. That's one thing that the press has to do constantly. The other thing they have to do is, they talk about the hate crimes right in here, and how this was all of a sudden associated with that, even though it's half a world away, and we really don't know what's going on there. They don't know what's going on over here. But let's just assume that we're all, same secular group. We're also, it goes to saying that, this is covered extensively. We're getting reports, eyewitnesses, a whole shebang. And of course, the New Zealand Prime Minister says that gun reforms are coming. Of course. What else is new, right? Here's a little clip, though, from Paul Joseph Watson. And this next minute or so is quite telling.
Mentioned it. CNN didn't even report on it. 12 entire Christian villages in central Nigeria were wiped out last June. Over 200 dead. No one cared. Islamic extremists bombed a Roman Catholic cathedral on the Philippine island of Jolo, killing 20 people and injuring dozens of others. No one cared. Christians worldwide are the most persecuted, killed, and ethnically cleansed religious group on the planet. And no one cares. When Islamic terrorists attack Shiite mosques in the Middle East, often killing people in numbers even greater than the New Zealand tragedy, no one cares. It's barely a headline for a few hours, and then everyone forgets about it. They only pretend to care when they can exploit the tragedy for their own agenda. And it's sick. Then you have tweets like this, which try to make everything into some kind of grisly competition to score oppression points by completely ignoring the industrial slaughter of innocents by Islamic jihadists. So far in 2019, there have been 453 Islamic terror attacks in which 1,956 people have been murdered. 4,305 Christians were murdered by Muslim extremists because of their faith in 2018 alone.
Yeah, some of these numbers are just horrific, and they're not being reported. Of course, this has to do with the suppression by the media against certain atrocities. All these are atrocities. Whether against Christians or Muslims, they're all atrocities. But certain groups get preferential treatment. One thing that you can see who gets the preferential treatment is just look what happened in the UK with this LGBT community guidelines in schools being now eliminated because the Muslims protested. When Christians protested, it fell on deaf ears. As soon as the Muslims protested this, it was passed into law that no more homosexual teachings in school. It just shows you that certain groups seem to have their microphone, and other groups, anything can happen to them, and you hear nothing from them. One of the problems that I'm having with this is what is the agenda here? Obviously the media is controlled by the elites, and it's guided. The media is there to do its job for the elites, to push the narrative. But what is this all going to come down to? This mingling of cultures that really don't mingle very well. I mean, a Muslim gets offended over something like bacon, beer, a little too much flesh showing on a summer day, music. We're not exactly compatible here. But yet, the narrative is always that we should be pushed together. Well, this eventually is going to cause conflict. I mean, it's just a matter of time before another tragedy happens against Muslims or against Christians. It's just a matter of time. But this is always being pushed. Why is this so? To the elites, it is a war. It doesn't matter what kind of a war. If United States were to invade Syria, would that do the trick for them? Probably yes. If there's a race war started in the States, would that do the trick? Answer is probably yes. A religious war is just as good as any other war. It seems like these guys are always pushing for some kind of escalation. Nobody says that this is a good thing, and it's actually a terrible thing. But when you report only on one and not on the other, it really does handicap the people that some of this oppression is going against. And it enables the other groups to act even more. Media is really the right hand of the elites. They're not independent anymore. They're not doing it for good. They're not doing it for the people of the countries. What they're doing they're doing it for a purpose. They're doing it to fill an agenda by the elites. I'm just going to let Paul Joseph Watson talk a little bit more, and I'll call it for a day.
Christian living in a majority Muslim country is 143 times more likely to be killed by a Muslim for being a Christian than a Muslim is likely to be killed by a non-Muslim in a Western country for being what he is. A Frenchman is 10 times more likely to be murdered by a Muslim than a Muslim being killed by a non-Muslim terrorist anywhere in the Western world. If you want to turn this into some kind of sick numbers game, you're going to lose. The fact remains, engaging in legitimate debate about the impact of mass migration and falling fertility rates doesn't make you complicit in terrorist attacks. Just as when Islamic terrorists cite the Quran before their rampages, doesn't mean that every Muslim who reads the Quran is complicit in those attacks. Islamic terrorists cite foreign interventionist wars as justification for their attacks. That doesn't mean Muslims who engage in legitimate criticism of foreign interventionist wars are complicit in those attacks. The shooter said he was an eco-fascist who loved...
See, there he proves a point of mine. It's just to start a war. If we really cared about the Muslims, why are we bombing their countries? And this is not done by ordinary Americans. Most Americans hardly even know the countries that are being bombed. But we continue to do it. Obama was supposed to be the great peacemaker. And instead, he was bombing 8 countries, and most of them Muslim, at the same time. And this is pushed. This really is a push to get this done. And like I said, media is very complicit in this. We'll finish listening to Paul Joseph Watson.
Communist China. Does that mean environmentalists or members of the Chinese government are complicit? No. After every Islamic terror attack, the left repeats the same mantra. Not all Muslims. Islam is a religion of peace. They go out of their way to emphasize the immorality of collectively demonizing a whole group of people. Yet what's the first thing they do when there's a right-wing terror attack? They collectively demonize a whole group of people. Regressive left. Jihadist terror attack? Don't name it Islamism. Don't talk about the ideology. Understand grievances and hug a Muslim. Also regressive left. New Zealand far-right terror attack? Blame pregnant Chelsea Clinton, compile hit lists of individuals and ban right-wing pundits. Listen, I know the temptation is always there to use guilt by association to smear your political adversaries. I know because I used to do it myself, and then I stopped because I realized it was a zero-sum game. I realized it was disingenuous and callous. I'm not going to cite the terror attack in Utrecht today to collectively demonize anyone apart from the individual lunatic responsible. But the left...
That was an attack in the Netherlands that, well, because it was done by a Turkish descent, and it apparently hit the Turkish community, it was underreported. But, I mean, they were ready to say that it was a white supremacist act, and then they realized who the shooter was, and then you don't hear anything about it.
Will never stop doing that. And that's not because they genuinely care about Muslims or other religious minorities. They don't. Their complete boredom and silence in the face of mosque attacks in the Middle East, church attacks in the Middle East, and attacks on Christians proves that. They only care about one thing: power. Obtaining power by silencing their enemies. And while claiming they have the moral high ground, that's exactly what they'll continue to do. You don't have the moral high ground. And how dare the media blame people like me, the same media that lobbied for disastrous interventions in Iraq, Libya, Syria, that cost hundreds of thousands of innocent Muslim lives, interventions that caused the international migrant crisis.
Yeah, there's never much concern about that. When you're killing by hundreds of thousands, it seems okay. That's kind of crazy.
Interventions that I opposed in defense of Muslims living in those countries at every turn. Right-wing terrorism is disgusting. Islamic terrorism is disgusting. Both are massive problems. But what's also disgusting is your frenzied obsession with exploiting tragedy to further your own fascist political agenda every single time.
Yeah, it's all about control. And in the end, that's what they want. And any way they can get it, that's what they're going for. Thanks for watching.